Change isn't just coming, it's already here. This is Ask for Change podcast, hosted by leadership expert Meridith Elliott Powell. Brings you weekly conversations with leaders and experts who are redefining success in a world of disruption. Let's begin today's journey and turn uncertainty into your competitive advantage.
Let's turn uncertainty into our competitive advantage. I'm Meridith Elliott Powell. Welcome to the Ask for Change podcast, the show where we show you how to shift, change, and turn uncertainty into incredible opportunity. And life is full of so much uncertainty right now, and none bigger than the topic we are going to talk about today. I have communications leadership presentation expert Allison Shapira here to talk to us about AI and its impact on leadership and communication today. Welcome to the show, Allison.
Thanks, Meridith. What a treat to be with you.
Well, I am excited. I want to dive into your new book, but I want to back up. And for people that don't know you, I was doing some research getting ready for this podcast, and the list of credentials you have is just lengthy. A lot. So how do you describe yourself, to people? Like, what do you share as your background and expertise?
I share that first and foremost, I trained as an opera singer. So that informs the experience that I had that brought me to the field of communication. And then I started a business first teaching public speaking, but then I realized the way we communicate isn't just when we're on a stage, it's how we communicate every day. And as we move up in our career, those one-on-one interactions that we have with our team, with clients, become even more important. So I went from opera to public speaking to leadership communication. And now I teach leadership communication at Harvard, at the Kennedy School. And I describe myself as someone who advises leaders on how to build their confidence to be more effective, especially in the way they communicate.
Why is communication such the challenge that it is? I don't walk into any organization that communication isn't. It isn't. Like, if you do a survey, employee feedback or somebody's 360 review, communication always comes up as a challenge.
One of the reasons communication is always a challenge is because it's something we're never formally taught in school. We maybe have a course in rhetoric or written communication, maybe in college if we're lucky. But for most of us, we learn communication on the job, which means we learn through trial and error, and we usually learn from people who also have never studied communication. So we don't always have the best role models. And there's often this perspective that if you make it to a certain point in your career as a leader, that you are an effective communicator. But so many of the senior leaders I work with say, I wish I had learned this 20 years ago. 30 years ago, because I never formally learned, which means I don't feel confident in my communication skills because I don't have a tried and true process I can consistently rely on.
That is, it's such a good point, right? It's so funny. The skills we really need in life are never the skills that are really focused on when we go to school. I think about like finances, as another one. But this may sound like a silly question, but I think it's so important. What exactly is communication?
I love that you ask that idea of what is communication. And one of the best definitions of communication I learned comes from a colleague of mine named Trudy Bresner, another terrific communication practitioner, who defines it as the interchange of ideas between two people who are aware that the other is present. This idea that communication happens person to person, not one person to many, but it's always this exchange of ideas between two people who may be in person or virtual. And what it recognizes is the fact that in order for communication to take place, there's more than just one person speaking into a void. There's a listener who responds in some way and is moved or engaged by the communication. So that's been my favorite definition of communication.
Yeah, I love that because I think so often we think that communication means I told you this. And I think it's one of the fundamental biggest flaws I see in leadership is I've told them 1,000 times. And until the other person takes action or use your term responds, then there's been no communication. They didn't hear it, they didn't understand it, they weren't moved by it or anything like that. So I think that's yeah, I think that's really important. Now, and that's why I want before we get into this conversation, I think it's really important for the audience to understand just how big and how two-way communication is. So you wrote this powerful book called Speak with Impact. Really focusing on communication. And since that book came out, we've had this other piece of communication become mainstream, which has led to your second book, AI for the Authentic Leader, How to Communicate More Effectively Without Losing Your Humanity. And I really want to read the the second piece of this twice, How to Communicate More Effectively Without Losing Your Humanity, because I think it is the one thing we are all fearful of with AI is that we're all just going to become robotic. So talk to us about what moved you to write this book. What was your inspiration or motivation or just deep need to write the book?
Thank you for sharing that. And actually, there was a second book in between these two books, an ebook that I called Speak with Impact virtually, because I wrote the book before
Right.
the pandemic. And then during the pandemic, I thought, let's update this book for hybrid and virtual communication. So there's a mini book in between called Speak with Impact virtually, which means technically AI for the Authentic Leader is my third book. And why did I write it? I wrote it not because leaders who I work with were asking me about it, but because they weren't asking me about it and they should have been asking me about it. So 8 years ago, way before generative AI and ChatGPT came out, 8 years ago, app developers started to come to me to test their public speaking apps. And I noticed how they started to use AI more and more to help people remove their filler words and keep track of their pacing and pausing. And I realized AI was becoming very good at helping us with those technical components of communication. But I like to focus on the deeper components of communication, which are who am I? How do I feel about myself? How do I communicate with myself as a driver of how to effectively communicate with others, which is a critical component of our leadership. And I thought, what if AI could help us with those deeper components? So about 5 years ago, I started to actively research, study, learn about AI, use AI. And then when generative AI came out, everyone started to talk about it. And then all of a sudden, it was the forefront of what everyone's talking about now, from CEOs to investors to the media. And so the idea behind my book, AI for the Authentic Leader, is that instead of just using AI for efficiency or to outsource your email drafting or your LinkedIn posts, what if you could use generative AI to tap into your authentic voice and actually make you a better human through the use of AI? So it's a counterintuitive perspective that I talk about in the book, because right now we're at this inflection point where these massive companies, many of them, I work with their leaders. And when ChatGPT came out, the companies banned AI at work. They said, don't use ChatGPT. But now, over the past few years, these companies have realized we do need to roll out AI. How are we going to do it? And now they're expecting their leaders to become champions of their new AI initiatives. And the leaders are thinking, wait a second, first you told me I couldn't use it. Now I'm supposed to be an expert and the champion to get my team to do it? I don't even know if I feel comfortable using it. So I realized there's this massive there's a massive knowledge gap within these organizations and an enormous change management issue that's even bigger than the technology itself. And so I wrote the book so that the individual leaders I work with can become more comfortable using AI to be more authentic leaders, which is what I teach them to do anyways, so that they can more effectively take ownership of these AI initiatives. And it's not all rosy. Learn about the dangers we have to be aware of as we guide our teams, our companies, our countries through this transition that we're going through in the world.
So, the biggest word that struck out to me when I started reading the book is integrate. And the reason I want to draw attention to that word is because it is not something, I mean, we hear about it integrating AI into our companies, integrating AIs into, our systems and our processes, but not into our leadership. And so I want you to talk, I mean, how do you have these beautiful models, these beautiful tools. How do I begin to integrate it? Like if I am a leader listening to this, where do I start? I mean, where do AI seems like this mountain of overwhelm. And in fairness, it is. I mean, nobody's really generating any money with it right now. Just it's this thing we all think, no, we need to figure out. But how do I begin to integrate it into my leadership?
So I start with communication because that's my area of focus. And I always recommend people start, when they use AI, they start with themselves and they think, what's a challenging message that I have to communicate? Maybe I need to roll out a new initiative. Maybe I need to propose a change in our workflow or our process. So it starts with you having an idea about what's a challenging message you have to deliver. Then, and I always recommend you write the first draft of whatever that message is. Then you can use an AI tool, whether it's Copilot, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, whichever language model you're using at work or individually. And then you can use it as a brainstorm partner to say, how might I frame this message for this target audience? How about I work with a colleague who has this Myers-Briggs personality style. Here's what I need to say. Here's what I need to get them to do. Based on this personality style, what are some arguments that might work for them? So you use it as a brainstorm partner to give you some ideas, but then you have to come back in and evaluate whatever it is that the AI suggests to make sure it's authentic to you and it's accurate, because we know that especially at this point in time, AI tools can hallucinate or fabricate inaccuracies. So we always have to test that. So that's the beginning of the process. I have an entire framework that I teach in the book, but it starts with you identifying a need and then asking AI for ideas on how to address that particular need, and then you evaluating what that AI has suggested to see what feels authentic and effective and accurate.
Nice. Do you have to, when you start with something like, that, I love the fact that you said you really need to draft the first piece yourself, because I think that's so critical for us to still keep thinking. I mean, I think we need to remember that AI is a tool and sometimes it's completely inaccurate. Like we cannot just, turn everything over to AI. But are you suggesting that as leaders, we use AI on a daily basis throughout our day to work on, communicating more clearly, communicating more accurately, connecting, engaging more than we do right now?
Yes, I
Yeah.
believe we should start to experiment with these tools. Anytime you have a question that comes up in your mind, open up the AI tool that you use at work and just ask the AI as an experiment. How might I do this? How might I do that? See what ideas it gives you. And one of the deeper use cases I discuss in the book is building your own custom chatbot that's trained on your values, your beliefs, your stories, even your favorite sayings, and then dialoguing with that tool to say, here's a corporate message that I have to deliver. I was just handed the talking points of my organization for a community meeting where I'm representing the firm tomorrow. How can I humanize these talking points in my own voice? And the idea is, under deadline, with stress, with 40 other things going through our mind, it's really hard to call forth our best self in every situation. But when you've taken the time to train a chatbot to who you want to be when you're at your best, then it can serve as a gentle, patient reminder of who you want to be and remind you how you can apply these best practices even under deadline when you're stressed.
So let's talk about the big word around AI that I think as a leader. How do you ensure AI is being used ethically?
Well, it depends on how you define ethical. And the challenge is everybody right now is defining it in a different place. For instance, just today, I published an article for the World Economic Forum on the danger of superhuman persuasion, which is what happens when AI tools have access to individual data and they can customize personalized messages at scale. And this is not about getting everyone to buy a certain brand of ketchup. This is about influencing people's beliefs and actions globally, whether or not we're transparent about how that's happening. So for me, ethical AI use starts with transparency about when and how AI is being used so that we can then make decisions about the credibility and accuracy of a message. For instance, I don't believe in a leader creating an AI avatar of themselves and then using that avatar without disclosing it's not really them. And I do believe we're going to see the importance, the amplified importance of actual physical human attention. I didn't send my avatar to this meeting. I care enough about you to make time in my calendar for you, as opposed to just sending my avatar to do the work for me.
Right. Or if nothing else, at least telling them it's an avatar is being sent to do the work for them.
100%.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about your AI authenticity loop?
Certainly. So I wanted to create an easy framework that leaders could use where they could feel comfortable using AI, but still maintain their authentic voice. And it has 5 steps. That first step, as I mentioned earlier, it starts with you. You have an idea, a need, a challenge about a message you have to communicate. You write it down, you dictate it, but it comes from your brain. The second step is when you bring in AI as a brainstorm partner or research assistant to find articles or tools that you can reference in your work. Of course, you have to fact check it to make sure it's accurate. For instance, today I was looking for a podcast interview of me with somebody else, and I asked ChatGPT to find that interview. It gave me the interview and a link, and the link was to the wrong interview, and I had never actually done a podcast with that person. So step 3 is the human, you coming back in order to evaluate what the AI has come up with. And you evaluate it for accuracy, you evaluate it for authenticity. The fourth step is, again, bringing AI back into the process, this time for feedback on your message. So you can ask the AI for feedback that simulates your top performers, your lowest performers, your individual contributors, your senior executives or newly minted senior executives. You can also ask for feedback on the delivery of that message. And there are AI tools that let you record a message and get feedback based on your delivery. Then the fifth and final step is you delivering that message with all of your energy and presence and passion, and you inspire others with that energy, and they come up with their own ideas, and the AI authenticity loop starts all over again. And in the AI community, they talk a lot about keeping the human in the loop when you use AI. I believe the human is the loop. And we strategically bring AI in as part of our process.
Yeah, that's so good that we are talking about bringing. We should really begin with us. Really begin with us as the loop. You talk so much about authenticity, and this may be another one of those silly questions, like I asked exactly what communication is. What does authenticity matter, and does it matter more in an AI world?
Authenticity is so important. And after over 20 years of teaching leadership communication, I keep coming back to authenticity as a source of trust and connection, both internally between leaders and their teams, and then externally with clients and stakeholders. And there are many ways you can define authenticity. I define it as speaking and acting in alignment with your values. And that's why I like to talk about how can AI make us more authentic? AI can help ensure that we're communicating in a way that's in alignment with our values. Now, I believe that's going to be even more important than ever because many people are using AI not to bring out their authentic voice, but to outsource their writing. And I'm sure you can see a lot of people's LinkedIn posts are all starting to sound the same.
Yeah.
And I say this in the book, I believe this deeply. As AI starts to smooth out our communication, it will be the jagged edges of our authenticity that stand out.
I could not agree with you. I could not agree with you more. Everything is starting to sound so much the same. And you know that I have a sales professional that works with me, and she's fabulous on the telephone, and she's having a lot of success. And I think the reason she is because she's doing what every single competitor is not doing, right? Everybody is creating these email, campaigns in their AI and sending those out. And people are going, it's just refreshing to talk and connect to somebody.
That's right. That's right. All the cold emails that we're getting, the cover letters when we have jobs that people are applying for, they all perfectly combine our background or someone's background with the requirements of the job. And at one point, very early on in generative AI, that was a way to stand out. But now it's too perfectly customized. And it's those authentic voices that haven't been AI enhanced that actually stand out more.
Absolutely. You know, it is hard to believe, but we are about at the end of this podcast, and I always like to end with two questions, and you can answer them in either order. One, how do people find out about you? How do they find out about your book, the workshops, the programs that you offer? And the second is, look, we're recording this at a time when we are, headed towards the end of the year, looking at 2026, and none of this uncertainty seems to be slowing down at all. In fact, it feels like somebody, threw a little gas on the fire, and it seems to be picking up. What is your greatest piece of advice when you look at the uncertainty of AI, when you look at the uncertainty of leadership out there? What is your greatest piece of advice for our listeners as they look at 2026?
Let's start in backwards order. My biggest piece of advice is find confidence in the uncertainty. And this is what I stress again and again in my keynotes. It's not about confidence in having all the information, because we are entering an era where we will never have complete information ever again. And the information we do have will forever be in question. So we have to find confidence in the uncertainty, not because we know we have all the answers, but we can confidently assert, I don't have that information. In fact, nobody does. Here's what we're doing to find out. And it's confidence in the process, if not in the final outcome, because nobody knows what the final outcome will be. Now, in terms of the first question, how people can find me. I love when people connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very active and post frequently. Would love to connect with them that way. And then they can find out more information on my book and some free resources that they have available through the book as well at my website, AllisonShapira.com/AI. And that is the site I've created for this book, which matches your branding as well. We didn't plan that.
Does. It matches the branding beautifully.
But I encourage people to check out the book. It's intentionally under 100 pages so that it doesn't sit on your bookshelf for 2 years. We don't have time to waste. Now is the time to learn about these tools. And I want the book to be as accessible and easy to read as possible so leaders can use it to prepare themselves and prepare their teams to navigate this future that we're all going through, and navigate it in a way that lifts all of us up as opposed to creating divisions even further.
I love that. What I love about the book is I really, in everything I'm seeing out there in AI, I haven't seen this approach to it, that really the human stands out in front first. And AI is really a tool that we use to increase our ability to be more effective, more human, and I'll use your words, even more authentic. And I love that juxtaposition, right? Because when we think about using AI, we don't think about being more authentic.
Exactly. This is the only book out there on AI and authenticity, which is why I'm so passionate about the value it has.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Allison. This has been a great conversation. As you know, listeners, we'll wrap this up, put it in the podcast. You can listen to it over and over again. All the tools and resources that Allison talked about, we'll make sure that the links to her website, to her LinkedIn profile, and most importantly, to not only this book, but all of Allison's books are in the show notes. You can access them there. And as for you, we hope that we took just a little bit of the edge off of the uncertainty, and we'll see you right back here next week for another episode of Ask for Change. Until then, go solve a challenge.